Hey gang, how you doing? Welcome to the clutch video. You may remember my 2005 R1200 GS. Last time we saw it, actually the last video that I made with this bike, this whole cylinder head was off and I was retorquing the cylinder head bolts or nuts because we had taken the whole thing apart. Today we're going to be doing a clutch, finally. The clutch went out in June and I haven't had the time or the money to get the parts and do the repair since then. So the next time you see this bike over the course of this video, it's going to be taken apart piece by piece. The clutch is in here between the engine and the transmission, and it's a giant pain in the neck to get to. So we're basically going to take the whole bike apart and replace the clutch and put it all back together all in one day. And hopefully the video will be shorter than one day, and we'll find out how it goes. But thanks for joining us. Enjoy the video. As always, let us know if you have any questions. You can email tech questions at bmwmoa.org, and we'll answer as many questions about this clutch job as we possibly can. Enjoy. Oh, you'll notice I'm wearing my Airheads hat. Simple by choice. It's ironic. See, ironic, because not simple. Took maybe 45 minutes or so. I'm at the point now where I need a helper because the last few electrical connections are going to come off, and then we're going to disconnect the whole rear end of the bike. I'm not entirely sure I should have taken the wheel off, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, so it's easy enough to put back on. It's just, you know, throw a couple of bolts in there and it'll hold steady. So we're making good progress. Now I just gotta wait for George to get here. The hard part is next. I've done the easy stuff. Obviously, you can see I took off the tank. The air funnel, I disconnected the throttle bodies. I took off a bunch of other little small stuff, and I had to work under the seat there in what should be the tool tray, but is where a lot of my electrical wiring runs for my various accessories. You can kind of see the fuse box. Little fuse panel that I've got in there and all the wires that are associated with that. There's a trigger wire that runs to the rear tail light that's going to have to either be disconnected at the tail light, or we'll cut it and splice it back later. The battery's out. We're ready for the hard part now. Okay, now George is here so we can get the hard work done. And he indeed, say hi to everybody, George.
Hi, everybody.
He told me that taking the rear wheel off was not necessary, but that it may help undoing the inner fender that goes over the wheel. And why do we have to take the inner fender off? Take a step forward so everybody can see your smiling face. Why do we have to take the inner fender off?
To pull the wire out from underneath.
And why do we have to pull the wire out from underneath?
Because BMW makes like our job like that.
How does BMW make your job harder?
With a little blue pill.
With a little blue pill. No, that's not your job. Hey, this is a family-friendly video. No, there could be a multi-pin connector in there. That was suggested, but there isn't, because they didn't do that in 2005. Do they do it now?
Some models.
Some models. So we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, we're gonna switch to another time-lapse video and you'll see what happens.
In the summertime, I was a coward while you were brave. Now, I'll always take the easy way out. Every time, overnight, I remember thinking, I'm not gonna go out like this.
All right, we're about to do something dramatic motorcycle.
I'm gonna put up a fight. I'm gonna try about all I miss. I'm feeling strong tonight, and I'll see you when I see you standing in my way. Oh, I won't know what to say. I won't know what to say. I was a liar, I was a thief. Now, oh, I'll always get the best of me every time, yeah. And I'll never say that this was the best when I'm still paying for it every single day of my life. Boy, night, I remember thinking, I'm not gonna go out like this. I'm gonna put up a fight. I'm gonna try about all I miss. I'm feeling strong tonight, and I'll see you when I see you standing in my way. Oh, I won't know what to say. I won't know what to say. Maybe I should be surprised. I'm feeling lucky. I've got a bad surprise. And I've waited all.
So we hit a snag in our clutch job. Minor snag, but big enough to stop us where we are. This thing down here at the bottom of the engine, sorry, what's this piece?
Flywheel.
Flywheel. Underneath the flywheel is the counterbalancer. That's the thing that makes it so when the engine's running, it doesn't vibrate and shake you off the back of the bike. It's got a seal on it that's leaking, weeping, seeping, weeping, which might not be a big deal, but because fluid's coming out of it, that means that it needs to be replaced. So we don't have one. We weren't anticipating this. We also decided that we need to replace the input shaft seals on the transmission, and we don't have those either. So we had to order the parts. We're gonna get them tomorrow morning and hopefully finish up this job. In the meantime, we can do as much prep as possible. We can get all the parts cleaned up and get the new parts ready to go as much as possible, so that tomorrow when we have the seals, we can bing, bang, boom the seals and just move on from there. So stay tuned. For you, it'll be in 8 seconds. For us, it'll be a whole day. So, okay, so it's tomorrow, and you can see I'm wearing the exact same clothes, and I did that because they're covered with goo from the parts cleaner, and that way I don't have to do laundry more than once. So we're gonna go through the parts that we're putting in so that we can take a look at them, see what they are, see what they're supposed to do. And where do we start, George? What's the first one we want to tell people about is, this is the friction disc, correct?
Correct.
Friction disc. Now this is a special one. It's made by Siebenrock in Germany and imported into the US by Wunderlich out in California. And the reason it's special is because this friction material is supposed to be oil resistant. So one of the flaws of these systems is that when the slave cylinder starts to go bad, it doesn't happen all at once, it happens gradually over a period of time, it starts to leak fluid. And that fluid gets into the housing here where this friction disc is. And on a regular standard friction disc, when that fluid gets up to the bottom level of the material, it starts to contaminate the friction disc, and then oil plus friction means, less friction. So what this is supposed to do is, if it gets contaminated with oil, it's supposed to continue to function as it's meant to function, which means longer period before repairs, and you're more able to kind of save the system if something goes wrong. So this is an upgrade from the standard OEM parts that I wanted to make, and I'm glad that Siebenrock makes one of these things and that I could get it from Wunderlich. That made things a lot easier. All right. Now the friction disc connects to, it's like Christmas when you get the box that has all the parts in it, unless you have to make a special trip to your dealer the day after you start the repair. And in retrospect, I should have cut these already instead of trying to rip them. It's too late. I'm just going to rip it. So this is the what is this, George? Is this the cover?
That's the cover.
This is the clutch cover. So it goes on the outside and holds everything in. So the friction disc and all the other stuff is inside this, correct? This way?
Yep.
All right. So I don't know if you can see, but they're pretty close to the same size with just a little bit of tolerance in there. And then this has guide pins and bolt holes so that you really, is it hard to mess up the installation of this? It looks symmetrical. It looks like it's in thirds. So I'm guessing it would be pretty hard to screw that up.
I've never seen it done, but
That doesn't mean it can't be done. All right. This piece, now do you have something that cuts? Hold on, what is this? Got it. This one's big and heavy, and taped to the bottom of the box for some reason. This is a bunch of parts all stuck together. There's the spring, that's the clutch spring, correct?
correct.
There's the clutch spring in the middle. What are the teethy things?
Those are for your starter.
That engages with the starter. So when you hit the ignition button, this turns your starter turns, this turns, starts your engine, right? That's why is that why your bike needs, you have to have the clutch in or be in neutral so that you don't gang things up? All right, and where does this go in relation to the other pieces? This goes on the inside.
That's the first
Right.
piece on, correct.
Does it go this way?
Correct.
So it goes this way against the flywheel, and it has locator pins too.
No,
No, those aren't locator pins? They look like locator
no,
pins.
those are rivets
Rivets.
that are holding it
Oh
together.
yeah, look at that, rivets. All right. So when
These pins will pass through.
those pins pass through. Ow. They pinchy. So, and then the friction disc goes in between those two things.
Correct.
And then when you squeeze your clutch lever, which you do with your left hand, on these bikes, they have a hydraulic clutch, so you push fluid into the slave cylinder, which is here-ish. The slave cylinder pushes on the push rod. We've got a new push rod on here somewhere, don't we?
Nice.
The slave cylinder pushes on the push rod. Double plastic. Long end out or narrow end out? Short end out?
That's correctly orientated.
This is?
Yep.
So there's your push rod is in there. So you squeeze on the clutch. We're replacing the master cylinder for reasons. So the slave cylinder pushes this in and separates these three pieces just a little bit, moves the friction disc so that you can then shift gears. It's just like a car, correct? This is automotive style dry clutch. That's why you have transmission fluid and engine oil fluid. Engine fluid? We'll go with engine fluid. So, and then there's a little piece of felt that goes around this little middle thing to kind of cushion and absorb.
Its main purpose is to protect the slave cylinder from clutch dust. Keeps clutch dust out of the bearings.
Keeps
in the slave
clutch
cylinder.
dust out of the bearings. So this is our new slave cylinder, which is in a box. You don't care what it looks like. And since we're replacing the master cylinder, when we took everything apart, there was gunk inside the master cylinder, which very likely came from the old clutch line. It's 80,000 miles. Oh, hey, there's the felt. We don't want to lose that. So at the same time, I decided to replace the master cylinder for the clutch. I'm also going to replace the clutch fluid line that goes from the master cylinder to the slave cylinder. I just got a standard Spiegler clutch line, just like they make their brake lines, except it's a little bit narrower. They put the banjo bolts on it. I had them do it in black and blue because, you know, why not? Any Spiegler dealer can get this. It's a standard part that they make. You call them up and you say, I want a clutch line for, tell them your year and your bike, and they send it to you. So the rest of the day we're gonna spend putting all this stuff back on the bike. We'll have to change the lever out because I have different levers on my bike. But once we get through that, I'll have a brand new clutch, new cylinder, new line, new fluid, and everything will work just fine.
After this, I can't believe I can't resist and let myself just walk away. And I remember thinking I'm not gonna go out like this. I'm gonna.
So the hard part is done. You might have seen in the little time lapse, we had a little bit of trouble getting the plates lined up. George thinks his alignment tool might be a little bit bent, but you go, when you hook the cover bolts through the toothy wheel, which has a real name, which is pressure plate. The clutch cover bolts through the pressure plate into the flywheel, and you do that in a star pattern. You just do them a little bit at a time, until they're kind of snug, and then you run them to the torque value. I'm not even gonna say the torque value because you should look it up because it might be different between different generations. So always look up your torque values. That's the same for the transmission case. Anything that you're doing on your motorcycle, look up the torque value, use a torque wrench, be careful, be smart, don't mess up your motorcycle. So here's the little push rod, sticks out just a tiny bit. The slave cylinder is gonna go on here. The starter is gonna go on here. The clutch cover is gonna go on here. The clutch cover is just plastic. It just keeps, you know, dirt and debris out of there. And once we get all that on, then we're gonna hook everything back up. Except for, I gotta put the seats back on and then we're all done. Today, I gotta admit, was not as much fun as yesterday. Disassembly is way easier than reassembly. I needed a lot more help today than I did yesterday. Getting it apart was a lot easier and a lot more fun too, to tell you the truth. Today was kind of a slog, but we got everything in place. We got the new clutch line, the new slave cylinder, the new clutch unit, the new head unit here, the master cylinder. It's all in place, and the last thing you do before we'll go test ride it in a minute. It starts back up. There you go. We're at 83,000 miles. 83045 is on the odometer there. I'm actually a little surprised it started. That battery has been sitting untended since the middle of June. I've been a bad boy. I haven't even put a battery tender on it, not once, but it started right back up. So that's good. Go back and read the article about the AGM batteries. That's a good AGM battery that's less than 3 years old. So I really expected nothing more or less than for it to start right up. So next we're gonna go for a little test ride. I'm gonna throw the seats on it. George is gonna take it for a ride. That'll be the next piece of the video you see. And I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have, except for like the last couple hours, which we're kind of, hooking up all the little electronics again is kind of a pain in the neck. So we'll talk to you again soon. So here we are outside. That's George with his fancy dancy 17-year-old helmet on. He insists on test riding the bikes as stripped down as possible. Airplane, hold on, there's an airport nearby. It's one of those little Buddy Holly airplanes, so. So no seat, no side panels. He's gonna take it for a ride. That way, if there's a problem, we don't have to take a whole bunch of stuff off. Of course, he's got his junk sitting right on top of the battery in the fuse box, so if there's a fire, kill switch. Put it in neutral.
It is.
Turn it off, turn it back on. This is quality stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. That happens to me sometimes. I don't know why. So there, luckily it started. And that's the first time my bike's moved since June, ladies and gentlemen. You can see there's no license plate on it. I took it off my insurance and turned in the plate. The clutch, I gotta say, was a pretty Herculean job. With the automotive style clutch, the dry clutch, if you got a car where you can just crawl underneath it, you got a pretty good opportunity to, you know, you can just disconnect the transmission, pull that back, drop it down. You can do it all from a lift underneath the car. But with these motorcycles, you really gotta pull them apart and get to that clutch. George has been gone for 5 minutes. There he is. He's not doing wheelies. So it looks like a successful clutch job. Thanks for joining us. It's been an effort. Now I gotta get a license plate and get this thing back on the road. Ooh, smoke. That looks like fun. We'll figure out where that smoke's coming from. Where's that smoke coming from, George? It's smelly smoke. Oh, I just got hooked on the exhaust. It could be on the pipes, the wrap on the pipes.
I think it's clutch fluid that dripped onto the pipes.
Yeah.
Oh, clutch oil, I mean. We'll take this back outside.
Yeah, it smells kind of sweet.
Terrible smelling.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Ladies and gentlemen, you should be glad you can't smell that. But yeah, just run it for a little while and burn that stuff off of there. Oh, I just said a dirty word. Now I gotta edit this video.